Throughout my 300 plus hours playing Warhammer 3, I've sent hundreds, no, thousands of men to their demise. Pulverized by angry red demons, turned into walking hedgehogs by those edgy tree lovers, or my personal favorite, obliterated by my own artillery. I've been mentally and physically assaulted in every conceivable way, to the point where I've become numb. These blobs of pixels, screaming in pain, became just that, blobs. But then it hit me. They aren't just pixels. They have feelings. Every soldier lost leaves behind a widow, an orphan. Hey, Dad! That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about some measly orphans. No. This was all about me. Finally, a chance to prove what I've always known deep down, that I am the greatest gamer of all time. With that said, today I'm going to attempt to beat Warhammer 3 without losing a single unit. Standing in our way are hordes of our enemies and my own stupidity. Can I achieve the short victory without losing a unit on very hard difficulty? Or will I be sent into a crippling depression that will last for a week? Gentlemen, let's begin. The first and most important step to any Warhammer challenge is choosing the right lord. There's a bunch of viable options for us here, but the man I chose to lead us is Kolek, a giant, lightning-charged centaur who literally eats the sun. He's a simple man. Smash first, ask questions later. He also comes with this handy mechanic. He gets 5% stronger, tougher, and more importantly, dummy thick. Meaning, if we subjugate enough of the world, Kolek won't just dominate the battlefield. He will be the battlefield. To keep track of the units we aren't going to lose, we have this beautiful statistic right here. If this number changes from 0, I will grab the hand grenade in my top drawer, sit down next to my PC and pull the pin, leaving behind no trace of both myself and my browsing history. We start our journey in the scenic mountains of Chimera Plateau and immediately skip past the tantalizing starting army to head straight for their capital. After our first victory, I decided to subjugate these fat meatheads. A questionable decision, you may be thinking, passing up the opportunity to gain our first Dark Fortress. And in a normal campaign, you'd be right. Doing this has 3 effects, however. 1. We gain another vassal immediately. 2. Dealing with these angry green guys just became a lot easier. And 3. We won't have any garrisons for a certain maggot to slaughter. Incredible foresight from me, I know. It's almost as if that very thing had already happened. Just as I planned, the greenskins took the bait, and 2 of their armies became easy pickings. For this challenge, auto-resolving battles is a rarity, and I'll be forced to actually play the game. A terrible thought. The crisp winter air of a campaign's first battle, filled with the smell of unlimited potential and gunpowder. Now's a good opportunity for me to lay out my actual strategy for not losing any units, Kolek, and mini Koleks, and regenerating trolls. Strategies are kind of overrated. For now, this giant blob of death will be enough to annihilate everything we'll come up against.
Why are we still here?
The rest of these guys are here purely to increase the auto-resolve chances. Risky? Incredibly. But if it helps me avoid actually playing, then that's a risk I'm willing to take. That's the first battle won, and no units lost. Only another 342 to go. As Kolek is my main killing machine, I've decided to disregard the skill tree that actually matters, and instead chose to give him some serious drip. I plan to use Kolek and my other lords as tanks, to soak up some of the damage from the enemy's toughest units. So increasing their pain tolerance is of utmost importance. And because Kolek has the same BMI as a collapsed star, he plows through enemy lines like an obese man sprinting to the door when his Uber Eats arrives. I moved on to the first of the greenskin settlements and immediately began foaming at the mouth. It's like Minecraft diamonds or a shiny Pokemon, but better. It's an auto-resolve with no losses. I made a critical mistake, however, and accidentally occupied this settlement. Warhammer 3 is an allegory for life. Where there's bad, there's also good. It just so happens that this good is in the form of gifts from the underworld. Gifts of Chaos allows us to exchange the helpless souls we plunder for various buffs, upgrades, and units. I claimed the Ruinous Bulwark gift, which makes our troops more resistant to missiles, and gives us the ability to blow a fucking hole through the enemy's walls. Twice. I marched on the final orc settlement, and they chose to meet us on solid ground. Clearly, they had made the wrong decision. With that battle won, we subjugated the orcs and had ourselves 3 vassals, all by turn 6. The real challenge in Kolek's early game comes in the form of a giant, heavily armored maggot. Tamurkhan is a tough combatant in any playthrough, but for one where you can't lose a unit, let's just say this isn't my first attempt. And it just so happens that he's wiped out our starting vassal and is right on our doorstep. Think of Kolek as a four-legged pimp, and his vassals, the pimpies. Send them out on a street corner with little to no clothing, and you can make your enemies do whatever you want. The horny maggot lord couldn't resist our enticing offer of ogre bulls and noblars. And in his haste, he fell right into my trap. Although the auto-resolve thinks every unit we have will die, it doesn't know just how stupid the enemy AI is when they've been ambushed. I sent Kolek and the boys after the maggot lord immediately, and had him embroiled in a circle of pain. If I could take him out, then the rest of his army shouldn't be too difficult to deal with. Lucky for us, half of their army decided to leave the battlefield without helping their lord. One example of the AI's incredible battle prowess. Unfortunately, this bastard managed to slip through my fingers right before I could take him out. Not to worry though, half of them were gone, including a beast of Nurgle. I tracked them down shortly after and intended to finish what I started. Our dragon ogres smashed into them once again, and with Tamurkhan at such low health, it wasn't long before he fell. I also unlocked a new spell, the Penumbral Pendulum, which rips apart fodder with a giant scythe. With the maggot's main army dealt with, we could now start raising some of his lands. I also increased our hero scouting, which increases the drop chance of magic items. These are essential for us to give to Kolek and our heroes, which gives us higher ward save and missile resistance, among a bunch of other important buffs. The number one most important thing for us in this campaign is increasing every unit's survivability. Lower entity units, like monsters, will usually have higher health bars and require less micro. Eventually, the goal is to have an army of Kolek, slightly smaller Koleks, and then even slightly smaller Koleks, amongst a bunch of other extremely strong single-entity monsters. Another useful function in the Warriors of Chaos campaign is the Warband. You should join the Warband upgrades. We upgraded our Chaos Trolls to Chaos Trolls, but with armor. Speaking of upgrades, let me tell you about how I upgraded my life with Apex Gaming PCs. Unlike my grandpa, Apex Gaming PCs don't discriminate. They're made to run all your favorite games and handle your hard drive's unique workload. These machines are built to take a beating, trust me. I've tested this extensively by having thousands of my men simultaneously ripped apart with a detail that is second to none. I've partnered with the guys at Apex Gaming PC, so whether you're gaming, editing, or just need something reliable to scream at when you lose a unit in a no-loss challenge, Apex has a PC for you. Use my link in the description and get yourself 10% off at checkout. Thanks to Apex for sponsoring this video. Now, back to no losses. Although they have terrible leadership and tend to rout, they also have regeneration, and with the new addition of armor, they are surprisingly durable. I'd pushed the disgusting maggot lord back to his final settlement. However, he bunkered down in his capital and refused to come out. Taking on his army combined with his garrison was too big a risk for me to take. I needed to get stronger before I could win that. So I settled for extortion, and we were free to move on to the next step. On the topic of getting stronger, there was a certain lord to the east of us who could help me do just that. Archaon the Ever-Chosen. Now, don't be fooled from the fire spilling out of his eyes. He actually has the heart of an angel, and I intend on ripping that heart straight from his chest. Doing so will grant Kolek Archaon's defeat trait, making him 10% more resistant to spells, 5% extra physical resistance, and +2 melee attack. It was at this point that I realized I was incredibly rich. It turns out subjugating a bunch of people and forcing them to pay you every turn was actually a pretty profitable trade. After reluctantly being extorted myself, I beelined it over to Archaon, who was surprisingly weak with just one settlement. I wasted no time at all and immediately attacked. To aid us in this battle, I recruited 2 aspiring champions. These guys are some of the toughest to kill infantry in the game, with 120 armor plus a barrier, making them a fine addition to my mindless meat grinder. Kolek also unlocked his Lord of the Storm ability. If anyone even remotely looked at me the wrong way, I could send giant lightning bolts from the sky to disintegrate them. My blob strategy is simple but effective. Tie down the enemy in a cluster, while Kolek and his big, meaty ass could still move around freely. With 720 weapon strength and all the buffs at our disposal, it didn't take long to turn Archaon into Kolek's personal sub. After ending the apocalypse himself, Kolek gained his defeat trait. Next up was his final settlement. The tactic? Knock on their door like a bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses, and when they let us in, smash. This wasn't just any normal battle though. No, this was the first battle where I could show off my true strategy. You see, our blob has two functions: to protect our own units and to bunch up the enemy. And once they were all nicely packed together like sardines, it was time to set off one of my favorite AoE spells in Warhammer, the Pit of Shades. Not only does it have one of the coolest animations ever, but it summons a giant vortex that deals armor-piercing damage over time. This right here, this was going to be our shit. We wiped out Archaon, took his dark fortress, and secured another vassal. Pretty good if you ask me. Vassals are the key to making this challenge possible. Think of them as a soft, protective layer of fat, insulating us from the rest of the world. If every dark fortress we take is surrounded by this buffer, we'll never have to worry about direct attacks. Now that most of the groundwork was done, it was time for me to actually start destroying settlements, because currently I only had 4 in 25 turns. And luckily for us, our Slavic neighbors tried to coerce me because they thought I was scared of their soft-brimmed caps. As a general rule of thumb, it's usually not a good idea to piss off your lightning-charged dragon ogre neighbor. I struck hard and fast by razing their settlements, providing my vassal the opportunity to waltz in. It wasn't long before we met Boris himself in battle. Boris is no pushover. He had some warbear riders who deal armor-piercing damage and are anti-large. On top of that, he brought a shitload of ranged units, which is a problem when your strategy revolves around clumping everything together in a giant blob of death. But we had one thing they didn't: Kolek and his huge, enormous ass. A couple Pit of Shades and a few hundred dead archers later, and that was all she wrote. I did, however, come dangerously close to losing my hero, who survived on nothing but his sheer will not to be taken out by a guy named Boris. After that, I abandoned Blizzard Peak because there was a slightly foreboding orc army just camping outside the front, like an alcoholic waiting for the liquor store to open at 9 AM. And believe me, I did not want to share the same fate as that empty bottle of Jim Beam over there. I moved quickly and fought Boris again at the Howling Citadel, another dark fortress. Thanks to our gifts of chaos, I blew a hole straight through his fucking wall. Kolek charged at Boris and literally rolled over him. With all of the buffs applied, his weapon strength was up to 840. You know what that means? Smashed Slavic burgers were on the menu tonight, boys. For the most part, my dragon ogres and trolls never really came close to dying, but my new units did make me perspire a little. These guys will have to be replaced by other, more durable and slightly more photogenic creatures. With that battle won, we'd captured our second dark fortress, and more importantly, beat the shit out of Boris twice. Fuck you, Boris. A quick check-in. So far, we've destroyed 169 units and lost 0. I haven't screwed up. Yet. To secure my western borders, I made a pact with Harvey Weinstein. In exchange for a fat stack of cash, he agreed not to sexually batter us. I considered this a bargain. With that out of the way, and Harvey about to give Boris a young actor's introduction to Hollywood, I set my sights on an old nemesis, a certain parasite that loves to reside up various creatures' rear ends. To assist me, I grabbed some gifts of chaos. This one makes the enemy units shit themselves. I also got the Undying Oath, which increases my vassals' tributes by 100%. To kick off our second war with the maggots, this charming character, who goes by Lord of Vomit, attacked me. Unfortunately, we couldn't retreat either, and the auto-resolve didn't like our chances. But I was actually pretty optimistic about this battle. You see, the enemy AI has a habit of waiting for their reinforcements before making a move. And, luckily for us, their reinforcements were coming from the other side of the battlefield. So I parked our entire army right where their reinforcements spawned. What followed can only be described as a literal death orgy. In mere moments, we wiped out half of their army. The second and much more dangerous half still remained though. They had some Chosen of Nurgle units who were the main threat to us. Thankfully, I just recruited Bilious Thundergruff, a tier 5 unit who beats the ever-living crap out of anything unfortunate enough to stand in his way. I targeted their armor-piercing damage dealers first, then used Kolek and my other lords to focus on the Vomit Lord himself. On a side note, our hero unlocked the Chaos War Shrine mount, amount, which gave him way more hit points. It was a tough battle, and I would have lost my hell cannon if their forces hadn't taken such heavy losses and routed. Note to self: artillery, good for distance. Artillery, not so good for close range. I took the Vomit Lord out and then went on to capture our third Dark Fortress. I replaced the Hell Cannon with Harold Hammerstorm, our new legendary hero. He has a cute little nickname for his hammer, the Hammer of Harry. Oh, it's so cute, look at it. We were also awarded our first Dragon Ogre Shoggoth. These guys are slightly smaller versions of Kolek and are utter killing machines. The scene was set, and we were ready for our final showdown with the maggot himself. I sent Kolek in to lure out the maggot, and, like an ethnic man in a fair fight, called all of my cousins to jump him. With Tamurkhan out of the picture, the chances of our units getting their heads chopped off dropped dramatically. But during my reckless uphill charge, some of our units got separated from the blob and started dropping like flies. Panic set in, so Kolek ran through every poor bastard on the battlefield, launching them 5 feet into the air like ragdolls. He arrived just in time to save the day, and I dropped every spell in my arsenal on their heads, just barely managing to rout them. With the maggot defeated and his final settlement under our control, I subjugated him, another vassal, and another 50 pounds added to Kolek's arse. Our next target? A mutated cucumber with anger management problems. Nothing to worry about. They're only the strongest faction in the entire game. If we're going to take them on, we'll need all the help we can get. Grimgor was already in a couple of wars, so most of his forces were probably off fighting somewhere else. I used this to my advantage and began steamrolling through his lands, killing anyone and everyone in my way. I was rewarded with a new Regiment of Renown unit. Well, we meet again, my fat uncle. If you don't know who this is, then go and check out my last video, where I used him, along with a bunch of other units, to literally shit all over my enemies. By now, I had the Pit of Shades fully upgraded on multiple heroes, and Kolek was a literal truck. The war with the angry cucumber was a completely one-sided affair. They did, however, chuck a spanner in the works by managing to confederate with our vassal. I didn't really care about losing our vassal. I did, however, care about poor Kolek's shrinking BBL. So far, we've captured 13 out of 35 settlements. With no more land left to take from Grimgor, it was time to shift my gaze toward the sadomasochistic couple next door. Before launching ourselves into another war, it was time for a quest battle. And what do you know? I'm surrounded by repulsive green men. As luck would have it, the battlefield was a long rectangle, perfect for my blob to do what it does best: mindlessly charge forward in a straight line. The orcs didn't stand a chance against my forces, and I even got to debut my fat uncle, who, true to form, dropped a leaky shit right over their heads. Unsurprisingly, it didn't turn them any greener. There was a slight twist, however, as Vampire Coast Army reinforcements arrived. Not that this mattered, like, at all. On a side note, can we just appreciate for a second how insane these battle stats are? With that victory, Kolek claimed his legendary weapon, Star Crusher. Not only does this boost his already ridiculous attack power, but it also grants him a bound ability to deal even more splash damage. With all of that out of the way, it was time for our next war. But first, I had to deal with the BDSM lovers' loyal cuck. While we were off chasing them though, Village snuck around and attacked my settlement with 2 armies. Luckily, I'd recruited some strong regiments of renown, and to my surprise, I was able to auto-resolve, taking out 2 of their armies with a completely makeshift force. Meanwhile, our trusty grub friend was busy ripping Grimgor a new one. Turns out, maggots are surprisingly effective at consuming a cucumber that's been left out. Another quick update: 416 units destroyed, 0 units lost. It was at this point that I'd finally gained enough souls to unlock the Carnage Incarnate Gift of Chaos. This gives us a Dragon Ogre Shoggoth every 4 turns. Think of it like a dividend, except instead of cash, you get a giant monster that brings excruciating pain to your enemies. We were starting to push the Cinch Alliance back, but with the sheer number of armies they kept throwing at us, our progress ground to a halt. It was time for a second army. Sure, it was a gamble, but let's be honest, is it even a good story if it doesn't start with everything on red? By this point, the grind of manually fighting every every battle had finally tipped in my favor, and I could start auto-resolving battles. Let me tell you, I was ecstatic. With our maggot eating away at the very flesh of Grimgor's bones, I decided to cash in while I could. By now, I dragged Kolek's ass into China, and Village was panicking, like a kid with ADHD who just lost his fidget spinner. My army had finally evolved into the ultimate no-loss death stack, and was composed entirely of dragon ogres and regiments of renown. Gentlemen, allow me to introduce the latest members of our cast. First, our bloodthirster. He was a nice fellow, if you considered decapitation a sign of hospitality. Next, a heavily armored giant bird who can summon silver rain from the sky. And last but not least, a chick with a lot of daddy issues. All of these new units made me feel invigorated, like a bald 50-year-old who just discovered TRT. At this point, we'd captured 20 out of 35 settlements. With our cinch foes on their last legs, it was time to find a new enemy we could take land from. Enter wrinkly ballsacks with fangs. Before I declared war on the rats, there was a couple of things I had to take care of. First, I offered Lokir Felhart to join his war against Imric if he broke his defensive alliance with the rats. He agreed. Then I gave Village back his settlement, and in exchange, he became my vassal. Ooh. Just like that, I'd taken every ally they had. The testicles were now out in the open, where everyone could see them. With the foreplay out of the way, I took 2 settlements immediately. Each one I took, I'd give to one of my vassals for gold. Not only did this make me richer, but it made my vassals stronger. Also, taking land like this instead of raising gave us the added ability of replenishing troops. Another quick check-in, 601 units destroyed, 0 units lost. I'd prepared for this war perfectly, even though the rats were extremely strong. They were now at war with half of the world. Even Lokir Felhart joined in. Everything was going swimmingly. That was until I got attacked by 3 huge rat armies. They outnumbered us almost 6-1, and our entire army was basically at half health because we just took a settlement. Shit just got real. I was a little concerned because the usual Skaven armies tend to bring a lot of laser guns. As you can imagine, that might pose a slight problem for our tightly squeezed giant targets. So I sent my 2 flying monsters ahead to immediately engage their ranged units. This was extremely effective and routed most of them. The real battle only just begun, however, because their reinforcements just arrived. Their forces clashed with ours, and thanks to some of our AoE spells like Chain Lightning, I was able to kill thousands of them. But just like I thought, their ranged units started to sit back and fire on our blob. So it was time for a little thing I called Operation Kill Their Fucking Gunners. I sent Kolek and our other chunky 6-limbed bros to rip apart as many ranged testicles as they could. I was also religiously dropping Pit of Shades every time it became available. If you don't believe me about how good this spell is, just take a look at the numbers. We won the battle, killing over 2,000 of them without losing a single man. My relationship with the Hollywood elite was now skyrocketing because I just formed an alliance with Harvey Weinstein himself. I pushed on, and now there were only 5 more settlements standing in the way of me and my rightful place at the pinnacle of gaming. 747 units destroyed, still none lost. Word of my rectal destruction of the Skaven spread quickly, and soon enough the other clans were hounding me with shiny gifts. I do have a confession to make though. In my reckless forward pursuit, with the finish line right before my eyes. Hypothetically, let's say one of my armies got ambushed, and hypothetically, let's say that army lost a couple units. In this completely hypothetical scenario, I had 2 choices. A. Replay another 100 mind-numbing turns, or B. Reload my last save and ensure that that ambush never happened. Now, I'm not saying which option I went with, or that I even had options to begin with, but let's just say the streak technically still lives on. And if that's upsetting to hear, maybe reflect on why you ever put your faith in someone like me to begin with.
Who are you talking to right now?
So, with our streak completely intact, and the integrity of this challenge still as strong as ever, all that was left was 1 more settlement. There was 1 more battle to fight before I reached my eternal glory. More rats to kill, and we had plenty of means to kill them. It was at this point that I started to wonder where my reinforcements were. They were just hiding here. For the entire battle, we'd gotten them down to just a single routing lord, and that's when the unthinkable happened. Like the second coming of Christ himself, this one stubborn rat became invincible. We had over 20 high tier units, pummeling him with everything they had on 3 times speed for over 10 minutes, and this bastard still wouldn't go down. Sometimes you've got to know when to call it quits, and he impressed me so much that I let him survive. All that was left was one more battle, in a fight where there was absolutely no reason to fight it at all. I charged with Kolek alone, just a man with a dream, and a gigantic ass. At this point, he wasn't even fighting. He was just charging back and forth, ragdolling every rodent in his way. And just like that, we had won, and achieved the short victory without losing a single unit. Totally legit, definitely flawless, no questions needed.
It's false.
And that marks the end of yet another video, boys. Come and join the Discord, and a big thank you to my Patreon members. Your support means the world. That's all for this one. I'll see you in the next one.